In Breath of the Wild, in the lovely farming settlement of Hateno Village, there is an inn where travelers can rest. That inn has a deck that overlooks the main thoroughfare of the village, and this deck is one of my favorite spots in the game. It's kind of hidden and out of the way, like how many people ever actually bothered to explore this little overlook. It's very cozy. In video games, sometimes I just like to stop and hang out for a couple minutes, appreciate the atmosphere, enjoy the music and the visual design, and this deck in Hateno Village is a perfect location for doing that. It's exactly the sort of spot that I would like to spend hours in real life. Also on this deck, you can find a man named Worten. He is a fellow wanderer who has traveled the breadth of Hyrule. He sits here all day, sipping from a mug, basically living the perfect life. If you talk to him, he'll tell you about his travels, about different locations of interest across Hyrule Kingdom. He's very friendly, refers to Link as brother because they are brothers of the road. He's one of those many likable but extremely minor characters that populate the world of Breath of the Wild, that make it feel a little more alive. A character most people probably don't even remember. Well, in Tears of the Kingdom, to my tremendous surprise, Worten is still here. He's still hanging out at this inn. There's been a 4 or 5 year gap between these two games, so it's kind of crazy that he's still here. Like, dude, you're supposed to be a traveler, go travel somewhere. But when I talked to him, he said, oh yeah, I used to be a traveler, but then I spent so much time at this inn that I actually fell madly in love with the innkeeper, and now we're married. And I was like, whoa, that's crazy. That totally explains why you're still here. It makes so much sense. Tears of the Kingdom has a lot of big, huge changes from Breath of the Wild that are impossible to miss. Like the new Sky Islands, the caverns, the depths, new monsters, new characters, new weapons and powers. But the game is also absolutely filled with all these little teeny tiny changes that most people probably never even noticed. Like this one, the fact that Worten married the innkeeper. How many people remembered that this character even existed? But the developers cared enough to include this little change, and I love that they did, because it makes the game's world feel so much more alive. These characters, even minor background characters, haven't been just stuck in stasis for 5 years. Since the defeat of Calamity Ganon, they have been living their lives, getting married, having children. And these are the kinds of small changes I want to focus on in this video. I found 10 of them that stuck out to me, but there must be dozens, if not hundreds more. By the way, that marriage between the innkeeper and the traveler has some other knock-on effects in the village too. In Hateno Village, there is this big, fat, ugly loser named Manny, who is something of a hopeless romantic. In Breath of the Wild, he pines for Prima the innkeeper, but isn't confident enough to approach her. In Tears of the Kingdom, since Prima is now married to Worten, Manny instead sets his sights on Ivy, the fashion-loving daughter of the general store owner. Unfortunately, Manny is still too shy to ask her out on a date. Don't give up, Manny. Big, fat, ugly losers like us will find romance someday. And if we don't, we can just start YouTube channels and get our social validation through positive feedback in the comments section instead. But let's get back to Breath of the Wild. At the Gerudo Canyon stable, you can find a man named Sasami, who says that he and his 4 friends were attacked by monsters on the road. Sasami made a run for it because he's a coward, but his friends have all vanished. He asks you to track them down and make sure they're okay. You can find all 4 of his friends on the precarious canyon ramparts, getting accosted by monsters. I'd like to take particular note of Flaxel, a swordswoman who is facing off against a bokoblin that's pushed her all the way to the edge of the wooden rampart, barely holding her own. She's pretty upset about Sasami abandoning her, and declares that she's not only going to give him a piece of her mind, but a piece of her fist too. After rescuing them all, you can find them back together at the stable. They've decided to go their separate ways. Inspired by Link, some of them wish to become better survivors, and others want to learn to be better fighters, but some of them just want to go home. It's kind of a bittersweet ending. Fast forward to Tears of the Kingdom. In Tears of the Kingdom, Princess Zelda and the Hylians have organized monster control crews to try and keep the roads safe from monsters. One of these control crews is led by a familiar face, Flaxel, the swordswoman Link rescued in Gerudo Canyon. And in her crew, you can find all 4 of her friends, including the coward Sasami. I was so excited when I saw her leading the monster control crew. I was like, wow, you're not just another loser in need of rescue from monsters anymore. Now you're the one protecting the travelers from monsters, protecting people just like your former self. Good for you. Apparently, inspired by Link, these characters didn't split apart after all, and instead chose to work together to play an active role in keeping Hyrule safe. They aren't cowards or damsels in distress anymore, and they don't need to be rescued anymore. They are warriors in their own right, fighting their own battles against Hyrule's enemies. This is one of my favorite small changes between the 2 games. A group of minor characters who are inspired by Link's bravery have become brave themselves. This is just one small piece of the story of Hyrule, a kingdom that was utterly destroyed during the calamity, but thanks to the bravery of not only Link, but also dozens of people like Flaxel and her friends, the kingdom is finally slowly coming back to life. This made me curious about the leaders of the other 2 monster control crews. The other 2 crews are led by characters named Haz and Torin. And while I instantly recognized Flaxel, Haz and Torin were unfamiliar to me. So I searched around in Breath of the Wild and I actually found both of them. Haz, who leads the monster control crew in Hyrule Field and near Fort Hateno, first appeared in Breath of the Wild as an armed guard protecting the East Akala stable. You can find him patrolling around at all hours. Back then, he was very concerned about Kilton, the monster-obsessed proprietor of the Skull and Bones monster shop. If you show him a picture of Kilton, he'll give you $100. Nice. I think Haz's story, even if there's not much to it, is pretty cool. Once upon a time, he was a lone sellsword, hired to protect a single stable, a job he performed diligently and efficiently. But with the rebirth of Hyrule, men and women like him, former adventurers and mercenaries with combat experience, are joining Princess Zelda's effort to restore the kingdom. He's not a lone sellsword fighting for himself anymore. He's the commander of an entire squad of ragamuffin Hylian soldiers, fighting to protect everyone in Hyrule. It's another little piece of the story of Hyrule's reclamation. In Breath of the Wild, Hyrule Kingdom felt like a truly lost kingdom. Its land mostly an uninhabited and ruin-filled wilderness. But in Tears of the Kingdom, it really feels like we're seeing Hyrule slowly stitching itself back together. But there's one more monster control crew leader. His name is Torin, and he leads the elite monster control crew. These aren't ragamuffins with buckets on their heads and broomsticks in their hands. These are real soldiers wearing armor and wielding spears. It took me a long time, but I think I have found Torin in Breath of the Wild. I was expecting him to be another soldier like Haz, or at least a fighter like Flaxel, but nope. At the Tabantha Bridge stable near Rito Village, there is a character named Torin. He is on a journey to find the Great Fairy, but can't reach her himself. So he gives Link 500 rupees to pass on to the Great Fairy. So I guess this is him, though it's not as satisfying of a character story as Haz's or Flaxel's. The commander of all the monster control crews, the guy the crew leaders report to, is a character named Graylins. For the life of me, I cannot find this guy anywhere in Breath of the Wild. I think he's a brand new character, though please do correct me if I'm wrong here. Anyway, moving on, let's go back to Hateno Village. In Tears of the Kingdom, there's a new building in town, and it's a schoolhouse. This school was commissioned at Princess Zelda's insistence, which I really like. I think Princess Zelda takes her role as Hyrule's leader very seriously, and she realizes that one thing that is essential to a kingdom's development is education. This school she founded in Hateno Village is probably the first formal educational institution to be built in Hyrule since the Calamity. The first school opened in 100 years. This is a big deal. In the present day, Hyrule is a kingdom of farmers and adventurers. In the future, with education, it may someday be a kingdom of scholars and engineers. And that all starts with Princess Zelda's school here. I also really like that it's clearly a Hudson Construction Company creation. I suspect this will be the baseline architectural style of the Reborn Kingdom, which is pretty cool. The teacher of the new school is Simon, who used to be Pura's research assistant at the Hateno Ancient Tech Lab, where he played second fiddle to a little girl. Nowadays, he's the one in charge of the little girls. Now that's what I call character development. You go, dude. The school currently has 4 students: Aster, Azu, Karen, and Safaro. All 4 of these kids were characters back in Breath of the Wild. Karen is the daughter of the mayor. In Breath of the Wild, she just sort of wanders around the village thoroughfare. If you talk to her, she claims she saw a little girl in the ancient tech lab, but she's frustrated that no one will believe her. In Tears of the Kingdom, Simon says that Karen is kind-hearted and shy, but a very perceptive child. He predicts that she will one day be a great scholar. Karen is also very fond of Princess Zelda, and very concerned about the princess's disappearance. Every day after school, Karen goes to Zelda's house, because she wants to be the first one to welcome the princess home when she gets back, but is always disappointed, which is kind of super duper sad. In Breath of the Wild, you can find Azu and Safaro near the ancient tech lab, acting as spies, trying to catch a peek of the little girl Karen claimed to have seen. Safaro is the son of the dye shop owner, and Azu is the son of the general store owner. In Tears of the Kingdom, Safaro is the school's brightest student, already reading at an adult level, and seems to have bigger dreams than just running the family dye shop when he's older. Azu now calls himself Azum. He's a big-time hero who patrols the streets with his 2 sidekicks, Neb and Nara, who are too young to go to school, but who do hang outside the school all day waiting for Azu to come out and play. You can actually find Neb and Nara in Breath of the Wild as well, running around in circles in the village's main thoroughfare. Finally, there's Aster. She is the daughter of one of the town's farmers. In Breath of the Wild, she too is running around in circles, and if you talk to her, she'll do a goofy little dance for you. In Tears of the Kingdom, Simon says Aster is a very active child who loves her single father very much, and that she spends most of her time talking about what he's been up to lately, which is cute. As soon as she gets off school, she runs straight home to eat tomatoes from the family garden. I think it's really cool that Nintendo took the time to add so much personality to these minor little characters from Breath of the Wild. It's possible to play all the way through both games without ever meeting any of these kids. It's that kind of attention to detail, especially to the little unessential details that a lot of people will miss, that makes Tears of the Kingdom's world so satisfying to explore. While we're in Hateno Village, I want to talk about Link's house. In Breath of the Wild, you can purchase an abandoned home in the village that has been scheduled for destruction. For huge sums of money, you can bling out the interior and landscape the exterior. In Tears of the Kingdom, it is now Princess Zelda's house, which makes perfect sense. She's gotta live somewhere, and Hyrule Castle is obviously uninhabitable. There's not a lot of available housing in Hyrule. At first, I thought that Link and Zelda lived here together, but I don't think that's actually true. Everyone refers to it as Zelda's house, and no one ever comments on Link's presence there. I guess he moved out? In Breath of the Wild, even after purchasing all the upgrades, this house still felt pretty barren. But in Tears of the Kingdom, Zelda has really livened it up. It feels a lot cozier in here, and there's a lot more color on all the walls. But for some reason, she took down the picture of her and Link with all the champions. It used to be hanging right here on this wall, but in Tears of the Kingdom, it's gone. What the heck, Zelda? Also, in Tears of the Kingdom, Zelda has set up a secret hiding spot for herself down in this well, which is pretty fun. Princess Zelda moving into Link's home, decorating it herself, filling it with pictures that are meaningful to her, is another one of those little details that adds a little life to the world of the game. Next, I want to take a hop, skip, and a jump over to Rito Village. In Breath of the Wild, after calming the airborne divine beast Va Meadow, there's a side quest in Rito Village called Recital at Warbler's Nest. In this quest, you must gather 5 Rito children, 5 sisters, for singing practice at a place called Warbler's Nest. The first one is Keel, a purple Rito who is already at Warbler's Nest, and complains that her sisters are late to singing practice. The second is Genli, a green Rito who hates singing practice, but who loves salmon meuniere. and has promised to go to practice if her sisters gather the ingredients and cook the dish for her. The third is Cree, a blue Rito who is at the general store buying butter. Also, earlier in the game, you can find her crying because she wants to help the village deal with the threat of the divine beast but doesn't know how. Aww. The fourth sister is Kotz, a yellow Rito who is trying to catch some salmon. If you talk to her before defeating the divine beast, she says that she has a plan to keep herself from being eaten by Vommeadow. She's going to feed Vommeadow fish until it's too full to eat her, so she's kind of dumb. And the fifth sister is Knots, a red Rito who loves singing. In Tears of the Kingdom, Rito Village is getting battered by a terrible and relentless magical blizzard that is burying the village beneath ice and snow. All of the adults leave the village to either find food or find a way to stop the blizzard. While the adults are gone, these 5 Rito sisters, who are all grown up now, are stepping up to take care of the village themselves. This is honestly super duper sweet. I was really excited when I saw this. It's really cool to see characters who were just little crybaby pieces of bird crap in the first game have grown up and are actually doing everything they can to help their village. It's really cute. You can find Keel running the armor shop, Cree is running the general store, Kotz is running the inn, Genli is still in the kitchen, except this time, instead of waiting for her sisters to make a meal for her, she's trying to prepare food for her sisters. That's character development, man. Except she still sucks at cooking, so you have to prepare the dish for her. But at least she's trying, it's the thought that counts. You can find Knots at the entrance. She shows off her continued love of song by singing an ancient Rito melody about the mythical Stormwind arc, and she also organizes the work of all the other children and assigns them tasks. Discovering that these girls had grown up and were taking responsibility of caring for their village in a time of crisis was honestly one of my favorite moments in Tears of the Kingdom. I just love how the characters in this world have actually grown up and become more responsible in the time between games. While we're at Rito Village, I'd also like to talk a little bit about Tulin. I don't know if I can really label this as a small change, since obviously Tulin plays a huge, massive role in Tears of the Kingdom. He's one of the 5 sages, he's by your side for an entire dungeon, he participates in the final battle against Ganondorf. There is nothing small about him, but he plays such a teeny tiny role in Breath of the Wild. Back in that game, Tulin is a blink and you'll miss him character. I'd wager that 90% of people who played Breath of the Wild, if you asked them who Tulin was, would have no clue who you were talking about. Tulin is the son of Teba, who, despite being one of Link's partners in the main quest line, is also barely in the game. Of all the main questline partners, the Flying Ace Teba easily gets the least amount of screen time. He has like 5 lines in the whole game. His son Tulin has even less screen time. You can find Tulin hanging out at their home. He just sort of sits around, doing nothing. If you talk to him, he has a handful of lines about his father, but that's it. He doesn't play any role in the main quest line at all. Unlike the other Rito children, he's not a part of any side quest. As far as characters go, this kid is literally nothing. So back in April, when Nintendo released the 3rd trailer for Tears of the Kingdom, and I saw these shots of Link flying around with a white Rito boy, I was like, wait, who the heck is that? Is that Tulin? It can't be Tulin, there's no way. But it is Tulin. Isn't this freaking wild? Can you think of a single example in another video game series where the developers took a completely unknown minor background character and gave them a huge central role in the sequel? The only other time I can remember something like this happening is when the developers took Skull Kid, who was just a random minor character in Ocarina of Time, and transformed him into the main villain of Majora's Mask, alongside the Majora's Mask itself. Except even Skull Kid had at least a small role in Ocarina of Time. He was a part of the mask trading sequence, and he gives you a heart piece if you play Saria's song for him. As minor as he was, even he had a bigger part than Tulin. Tulin literally does nothing in Breath of the Wild, and yet he's like one of the best parts of Tears of the Kingdom. His main questline is one of the best in the game, his abilities are the most useful out of all the sages, and his design is super duper cute. Again, I don't know if I can accurately call this a small change, but I can say that it is a super cool and unexpected change. But let's head back to Hateno Village, back to Link's house. In Breath of the Wild, there are 3 construction workers who are at first demolishing the house, and who later will build new features for a price. They are Bolson, Hudson, and Carson, and together they make up the Bolson Construction Company. Bolson is a flamboyant, ridiculous, and really fun character. He's concocted this completely ridiculous, goofy theme song and dance for his company, the same dance we saw little girl Aster jiving to earlier. If you buy all of the house upgrades, he announces that he's retiring from the construction business to go find a spouse. He doesn't want to spend his whole life working, he wants to live. Time waits for no man. Well, in Tears of the Kingdom, it turns out that Bolson retired to the small beachside resort town of Lorellan Village, which makes sense. It's a beautiful and relaxing location to retire to. Unluckily for him, during the upheaval, Lorellan Village is burned to the ground by monsters. Luckily for the village, Bolson is a master of construction, and if Link clears out the monsters and brings him a bunch of building materials, he can rebuild the whole town lickety-split. He even builds a new waterfront racetrack for them. It's one of my favorite side quests in the game, but his isn't even the most interesting Bolson Construction Company story. In Breath of the Wild, Hudson is this guy with the goofy haircut. He's a stoic man of few words and big muscles. He journeys to the Akala region to found a new settlement following Bolson Construction Company architectural ideals. He builds Tarrytown within the shadow of the old ruined Akala Citadel, gravestone of the Lost Kingdom. Tarrytown is the first new settlement built in Hyrule since the Calamity, a major landmark in the country's recovery. In one of the best side quests in the game, you help Hudson build and populate Tarrytown, building by building, resident by resident, which can be tricky at times, because according to Bolson Construction Company policy, only people with names that end in son are allowed to live here. After the town's construction is complete, the side quest ends with a marriage between Hudson and the Gerudo tailor Ronson, and the whole thing is really sweet. In Tears of the Kingdom, Hudson, as the retired Bolson's protege, founds his own construction company, Hudson Construction Company, which has become the premier construction company in Hyrule Kingdom. They built all of the towers you see in the game, helped to build Lookout Landing, the school in Hateno, and they joined forces with Princess Zelda to launch the Hyrule Kingdom Restoration Project, which distributes building materials across the land for use in construction. It's safe to say that Hudson has become a very big deal, a key figure in the Hylian landscape. But that's not all. In Tears of the Kingdom, everyone's favorite unflappable muscle man has become a family muscle man. Hudson and Ronson have a daughter, Mattison. There's a whole quest line involving helping her say goodbye to her home and family before leaving for Gerudo Town. That's really cute. I don't know if anyone else noticed this, but it felt to me like there were a lot more children in Tears of the Kingdom than there were back in Breath of the Wild, as if Hyrule's population is experiencing something of a baby boom, as it finally heals from the wounds of the Calamity. Alright, next up, and this is a really small one. In Breath of the Wild, there's this guy named Branli, who is stuck on top of the Ridgeland Sheikah Tower with no way to get down. Branli is obsessed with the Rito, who he calls birdmen, and he's come to the Hyrule Ridge region to study them. He's particularly interested in their ability to fly. He wants to study their wings, try to understand why they are able to fly with such relatively small wings. Anyway, he just happened to be in the exact wrong place at the exact wrong time when the Sheikah Tower was activated, which lifted him up into the sky where he is now trapped. He doesn't seem that worried about his predicament though, and sees this as an opportunity to run some flight tests. With him, you can play a minigame called Birdman Research Study, where Link tries to fly as far as possible with his glider. It's a fine little minigame, nothing exceptional. Okay, so in Tears of the Kingdom, there's an island off the coast of Lorellan Village called Eventide Island. At the start of the game, Eventide Island is infested with a horde of monster pirates, the same monster pirates who raised the village. In a shrine quest, you can clear out all of these monsters and reclaim the island for Hyrule. After doing so, if you return to the island and climb up to the highest point on the island, look who's here! It's freaking Branli! He's still researching flight now with Zonai materials, and he's got a Rito friend to help him out. He's not just researching the Rito anymore, he's researching alongside the Rito. And once again, that's character development. He runs a new minigame where you try to land a Zonai glider into a bullseye in the water. This guy Branli might actually be Hyrule Kingdom's version of the Wright brothers. I know it's just a tiny little thing, but I thought his predicament in Breath of the Wild was really funny, and I was pretty excited to find him at this secluded spot in Tears of the Kingdom, still trying to achieve his dreams of flight. Alright, to end this video, I want to talk about two final characters. Throughout Breath of the Wild, while exploring, every now and then you'll randomly come across these two sisters who are getting attacked by monsters. Nat is a clumsy adventurer searching Hyrule for the legendary Hearty Truffle, and Megan is her unhappy sister just getting dragged along for the ride. After saving them from monsters, Nat is undeterred and ready to keep exploring the dangerous wilds in search of the perfect mushroom, while Megan says she can't believe they're both still alive and that she wishes her sister would just give it up already so they can return home to safety. What's hilarious about this whole random background character storyline is that when I beat Breath of the Wild, I had like 50 Hearty Truffles sitting in my inventory. They're really not that rare. You can find them all over the place. These two sisters just suck at looking for them. And more than that, Link knows these two girls have nearly died multiple times while looking for Hearty Truffles. And he knows he has an inventory full of the truffles, which he could just give to them, thus saving Nat and Megan's lives, but he doesn't because he's a jerk. It always kind of frustrated me in Breath of the Wild. It would be so easy to help these two, but the game doesn't let you for some reason. Anyway, in Tears of the Kingdom, Nat and Megan are back, and they're a part of one of the better side quests in the game. This time around, they're not just searching for Hearty Truffles. Instead, they're searching for the fabled Mushroom Paradise, a cavern which contains the perfect growing conditions for mushrooms, and in which every kind of mushroom can be found in plentiful quantities. You can first find Nat and Megan near Rito Village. They're hanging outside this cave. They say that they need 10 bright cap mushrooms, but the cave is too dangerous to explore. After giving them the 10 mushrooms, they'll continue on their mushroom-focused adventures. Next, you can find the pair outside the Snowfield stable, where they say their camping site has been taken over by monsters. If you kill all the monsters, they'll reveal that their ultimate goal is Mushroom Paradise, and they'll share a hint where to find it. Following this hint, you can find the sisters, exploring a cave deep in the secluded Hebra Mountains, where all three of you will finally discover Mushroom Heaven, which is one of the prettiest spots in the entire game. Again, this is just a small thing, a little quest line, but it was cool to see that my favorite clumsy mushroom hunters from the previous game have not only expanded their ambitions in this new game, but that they actually managed to succeed in finding something worthwhile this time. It's just one more example of the hundreds of small ways that Tears of the Kingdom has improved upon its predecessor. In this example, it took a pretty forgettable pair of minor characters and gave them a fun little mushroom-themed questline. And that's it. Those are my 10 favorite small changes in Tears of the Kingdom. This video was a lot of fun to make. I really love all the small details Nintendo included in Tears of the Kingdom for people who really loved Breath of the Wild. All the minor characters whose stories have progressed or expanded between games. There are way more of them than I mentioned here, and if there are some you think are even cooler than the ones I brought up in this video, please do bring them to my attention. I'm genuinely curious to know about more of these little teeny tiny changes Nintendo made between games.